All right, and welcome the internet back to the Secure AF podcast. I'm your host, Donovan Farrow. I got one of the supreme guests that you all love and know, Mr. Jonathan Kimmitt.
Hello, everybody.
And he wanted to share a good topic that we run into during just doing, cybersecurity, whether it's IR or pen testing or all that stuff. He had a special topic today. You want to give what it is and a little bit of an overview on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed since I've been here is whenever we go into a new industry or a new client, one of the things we always hear is, we're special, we're unique. Our environment is unique, our processes are unique, and I generally agree with that. The industry is unique. Each organization is unique. But one of the things that I really engage with them on is the attackers aren't. They come in with the same processes to attack the organization, whether it's starts with phishing or it comes in through a vulnerability. And that's really something I wanted to kind of talk about and discuss with you, is about how the attackers look at organizations versus how the organization looks at itself. Because I think that mindset really hurts in some of the security controls of, we're unique, therefore we can't do this protection or that process or that policy.
Yeah, and I would, first, I guess my first example kind of, having, with what you kind of see, and I like the fresh perspective, especially in the consulting area. I would say this is a historical one, but people say, hey, we're too small to be compromised because they don't care about us. So I guess, what have you seen from that? And I have a story to follow up, but have you seen anything like that? Like, who cares about us? No one really cares.
Absolutely. I see it all the time. And I see it where people will say, we're too small, we're not on the radar, people aren't going to attack us. And then, I show them their firewall logs and I say, hey, look, those are attacks right there.
Right.
And it really freaks them out because they don't think they're doing anything that's going to garner any attention of an attacker. But then you have those attackers that are trying to get everything. They're trying to get the computers, the resources, the services. So everybody's getting attacked.
But how is that possible? Because the green light on their firewall is green. So how are they being attacked?
Yes.
How do they know?
Well, that's the interesting part, because if you have a machine that's out on the internet, it is constantly getting scanned. It is constantly getting vulnerability assessed. So trying to say, all right, is there a vulnerability in this server, in this? Let's say they don't even have a firewall and they have printers that are online. You go to Shodan and you do a search for printers or cameras or anything, and you get thousands upon thousands of them. So hopefully that firewall is protecting you and it's green. But I also find a lot of times they have an any rule in at number 2.
Perfect.
And therefore all their stuff is out on the internet.
Yeah. And even, I remember way back in my career, I was kind of insecure, but not really. I would say this is going to, again, I would say technically age me, which is fine. Probably like 2005, I found like a whole university printers online, and I didn't mean to. I was actually making sure my company didn't do it, which they were. And I was like, listen, guys, we got to stop paying for static IP addresses to the printers. I don't know what you're doing. This is a horrible idea. So me scanning ours, I found a few of those, and I called them. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, a printer was like, is that your printer?
Yeah.
You see my test page? And it is because talking to the network guy, they had because what they did, they said, we have remote sites, air quotes, remote sites. So they basically static IP address to the internet so anyone could print to them, which is hilarious. And they were a big university. That was obviously a long time ago, but even as of maybe 2 years ago, there was a dentist office that got popped. They had a staff of 4, and they were too small to be breached. Hackers don't care, but actually they do. 20 years of their X-ray records were encrypted. Wow. And the owner had been there obviously for over 20 years, and so he lost all historical information. They wanted, I think that one was around $12,000, which isn't a lot, air quotes. But to them, they were basically devastated.
Oh, yeah.
And then following that next step, he got hit by some, I would call them script kiddies or breakoffs from, I don't know if it's Conti or whatever. Everyone's kind of shattered now.
Yeah.
People got the tools, but no one got the keys. And we tried to negotiate with them, and they didn't have the keys. So it was all for naught. And he had destroyed all his data.
Well, and from a compliance perspective, what he has to report to, the regulators and the people who keep his licenses. I mean, all that stuff. It's not just the money he's lost in terms of the records and the business he lost.
Yep.
He's got all these compliances, and he might even have lawsuits that are coming from a civil perspective. So the fact that he did not protect, I'm not saying he did or he didn't protect, maybe something failed, but
Yeah.
the fact that those things weren't protected and those attackers got to him now has opened up a whole load of things that person has to do to protect his customers, to protect his business, probably protect his family. It's probably a family business. And you're right, it's script kiddies. It's bots. They're going out and trying to find this stuff. You're talking about higher ed. Of course, I come from higher ed. And higher education, they got IP addresses very early. So they were able to get whole Class B networks. And when they set them up, they put all computers with a IP address that's on the public internet. It was publicly routable.
Flat.
Just
the internet.
Flat network. And in many higher eds didn't even have a firewall until, maybe mid-2000s, maybe 2010.
Yep. And I would even say that I would be like, I'm not familiar with that. And then, we've worked with some about 2 or 3 large companies that we found out that they're basically distributed on the internet still because of their Class B network and stuff, still transactions over the internet, again, which is pretty terrifying. So let me take a big step back for people who may not be super technical. Can you explain how hackers go to the internet? You talked about Showdown, which is cool. Explain that. And explain how they find vulnerabilities. How exactly do they do that?
Oh, sure. So there's a couple different ways. You have kind of the manual way, the old-fashioned way, then you have the newer way of people finding things. But, let's say you just have somebody on the internet that's running tools like Nmap or Network Mapper or Mass Scan, and they're literally just looking for devices. If you have a device, it's going to respond to them. So they ping it, just a traditional ping. It pings out and your device responds back saying, hey, I'm alive. Well, then the attacker is going to go, okay, well, what is this? So they might do a port scan on it, looking for any ports that the firewall is allowing to communicate. So as an example, if you have a web server, it will generally run on port 80 and 443. So if the attacker reaches out on port 80 and gets a response, you go, well, maybe this is a web server.
Yeah.
If it reaches out on 443 and gets on for HTTPS and it comes back, it's like, okay, well, maybe this is a secure web server. Port 22 is a secure shell. So if you're trying to secure shell in. So the attackers are going to look to see what ports may be open on that box.
All right. Well, here's my question on behalf of the audience who's not technical. What is a port?
So I describe these a couple different ways. The best way I tend to describe it, especially for people who may not be technical, is remember in the movies, the old-fashioned telephone operators that had all the wires that they plug in and out when they're trying to connect people.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of the same way. So you've got a computer who needs to communicate to another computer. Well, in the old-fashioned way, operators, if you needed to talk to someone down the street, they would literally grab the wire you're talking on and plug it into the wire of the person down the street and go, okay, thunk, and now you communicate with them. In the network world, in the computer world, you kind of have the same thing. So your computer is listening on a particular port, a plug-in, and then another computer can only communicate with that port to get that web service or that website or whatever it may be. Now, where this comes in is firewalls. Firewalls put a barrier in between those, and you tell the firewall, only allow these ports. Now, there's 65 somewhat thousand ports available to you, and some of the ports are very common. Web servers are port 80 and 443. Secure shells, port 22. Remote desktop is port 3389. And this is just a common way for people for computers to communicate with one another. Now, you don't have to use those ports. You can use alternate ports. You can fake it. You can say, I'm going to put a web server on port 33,100. Okay. But if the other computer doesn't know that, they don't know how to see that website. So that's kind of a very quick, easy breakdown of how a computer talks with ports, and it has to make that old operator connect on the same line, and then you can get communication back and forth.
Yeah, that description for the younger crowd or people that watch Netflix, it's like the Umbrella Academy. You haven't seen that, right? So you're jumping from, place to place. They got to call in the main place and hook you in.
Yes.
And then they can warp you through that with your briefcase.
Or John Wick. Like how they did in John Wick.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, stuff's still relevant.
Yes.
But, yeah, so well said there. So we know what a port is now. So tell us about you scanning, what they look for. I would call them doors, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Doors open. And once they find a door open, what kind of happens? Are they just hackers just waiting, or how do they get in? I mean,
so the computer, being very helpful, will communicate on that port. So that, let's say you have port 80 open. When the attacker reaches out and touches that port on your computer wants to be very helpful and say, hey, I am a web server. I'm doing this thing. I might be a Microsoft web server or an Apache web server or this or that. And that way, the other computer knows how to engage. Well, if you have other things, let's say printer, it's going to be communicating on a port, maybe 9100, and it's going to give you a little bit of information. We call it a banner or a banner grab, where the attacker will reach out and touch the port and say, hey, who are you? What are you? And the computer, being very helpful, says, hey, here's some information about me. This is what I'm doing.
love that, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Very useful from the attacking side.
It is, yes.
And at that point, the attacker is going to look at that and go, this particular version of the web server might be vulnerable to something. So they go out on the internet, go out to Google, exploit DB, whatever, and say, hey, it's this version of web server that the banner gave me. Are there any vulnerabilities for it?
Right.
And then they go find that vulnerability and they might try it. Now, you can do this with web servers, FTP servers, any service that's being served out might have a vulnerability. Now, this is why patching is so important on every application you have on the server, on the computer, on whatever, so that it is patched for any known vulnerabilities. Now, that's the manual way of doing it. What an attacker really does is they go out to aggregators or something like Shodan, who their existence is to scan the internet and look for all these ports, look for all of these banners, and put it in a really easy form for someone to query. So let's say I'm an attacker. I could scan the entire internet. It doesn't take all that long with the right tools, but it does take some time. So instead, I'm going to go to a tool that will already be scanning the internet. And I say, I want to know about any printers of this level, this type of printer, maybe with this firmware version, whatever you may be able to get. And they'll pull printers from the entire internet, and it could be all over the place. It could be in the US, it could be in Europe, it could be in Russia. And they just query, say, I want all ports or all printers that have these ports open of this model, because they know that particular model is vulnerable to something.
Right. And one thing I just want to add there, we talked about scanning the entire internet. I know that sounds insane for some people, but it is possible to do. It's not difficult. And imagine someone always scanning. It's kind of like Google technology. They're scanning the whole internet to get new content, to escalate. There's a whole bunch of stuff different from that, but it does scan the entire internet, pulls that data in so you can put it in a search platform and find what you're looking for. Like you said, printers, and it's just as fast as you can type.
Right. And the tool is not a bad tool. I use the tool all the time. I wanted to know if my computers were visible on the internet.
Right.
I could absolutely go scan them. But instead, a lot of times, if I needed to do it quickly, I just run out to Shodan and go, okay, here's my organization's IP range. Give me everything you see. And then what I would do is go, well, I don't want that visible. So I go out on the firewall and close those ports down so they can't communicate, or shut down the computer, or do whatever I needed to do. So, I don't want people to think that those tools to scan the internet are bad things. They're useful. The problem is people may use them for bad purposes.
Yeah. And then another reason that I like to use it is if we're doing a breach assessment or something. Sometimes, if you get ransomware or something, everyone will pull the plug on everything, and then you have no information.
Yes.
So yeah, it's exactly. So you can go back to Showdown and say, oh, well, you had RDP open.
Yeah.
You had port 22. All these doors were open on this firewall.
Yep.
And the firewall guy may be like, we don't do that. That's impossible. I'm like, well, the internet historically shows that that would be incorrect.
Yes.
And maybe it was an accident. I worked for doing a kind of a network sweep for a company, and there was a RDP open being attacked from China, and I was like, whoa, look, this is open. We got RDP on the firewall. They're subverting inside, like internally to a exchange box. And the network guy was like, well, that's impossible. We don't do that. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just telling you what the robot told me. Like, take a look at my logs. He's like, we don't do that. It's unauthorized. We would never change something. They're change controls. Like, oh, okay. So here's what the robot said, man. I'm able to hit it too. So what happened is they had an open rule for an hour, air quotes on an hour, for a vendor to punch a hole in the firewall. I mean, jump over the firewall and work on a internal device, and they didn't close it back up.
Yeah.
So,
well, I've seen it to where they actually they were working on a firewall rule number 2, number 2 or number 3.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get it to work. And so, they would try this and this, and eventually you make enough changes and it resolves itself to any.
Right.
And that tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hate to subvert from the topic, but it is funny that everyone's like, especially, back today, even some firewall people today, I guess it's tough. I get it. Sometimes I have some, C-level person that's like, hey, I can't get my VPN. I don't know what's going on. Something. And they're just like frantic, just open. They're like, oh, you fixed it. And they're like, yeah, man, that's what I do. I fix stuff here. But what they actually did was they opened everything to everybody. So yes, they did fix the issue, but they let the entire internet in. So that problem resolved. Wink, nudge, nudge. Watch out for what's coming after that.
That breaks my heart when I see that. I see it a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, that any rule bites a lot of people. So going back to people saying my network's different, our policies are internal. Like how does all of that information kind of go back into the discussion?
Well, so what I usually get out of that is what they're really telling me. And I've come from organizations that we said that as well. I have said that to vendors.
Yeah.
My point of view when I was telling it to a vendor was it takes a long time to get things changed. It's hard, or we don't have money, or all these different things, and that's absolutely the case in a lot of organizations. But what I think happens is that changes when people start saying that for the right reasons. It just becomes that default answer. We're different. Such as had an organization not too long ago that we were talking about multi-factor, and they said they couldn't do it. It's like, we can't do that. It's like, okay. Oh, okay. Why? What is it that's stopping you from doing multi-factor authentication? It wasn't very large. It was not a very large organization. Right. And they says, well, our people just won't do it.
All right.
Okay.
Sure.
But that is a culture change. That's a social issue for the organization. Mm-hmm. And so I started talking to them about options to be able to change that culture, to change that social mindset in the organization, to let people know why multi-factor is so important. Fundamentally, multi-factor authentication, has been around for 13 years, 14 years now. I went and found it online the other day to see when it, the authenticator came out. So this is not new technology.
Yeah.
This is something that is standard operating now. This is industry standard. So when you have somebody that says, we can't do that, like, well, okay, hold on. Let's step back a second. Tell me why you can't do that, and let's solve that problem. If it's people don't want to do that, then we start talking about needs versus wants. You don't want to put a barrier in place for people to log into their email. However, you need to put that barrier because you're being attacked. And let me show you on the firewall logs where that's coming from.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. Think about it from that perspective is implementing change in technology is a culture change for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because they may not, be on even Facebook or Facebook, depending on where you're at, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Like if you're not like, there'll be a lot of people like, I'm not doing technology, I'm not doing social media. A lot of those kind of require you to have that now. So for them to I would say it's probably an older generation that this is not the way we've always done it, and you're going to complicate me even more. Plus security, all they do is like impede my job success.
Yep.
So that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the arguments that I've had for a long time. They always talk about securities being the people that say no. No, you can't do that. And people hate that. And they say, well, that's not part of the business. We don't say no. You can't say no. And I actually push back on that. It's like, no, hold on. There are some things that I have to say no to. If I was at an organization, I was a CISO, one situation came up, what they wanted to do was illegal. And I was like, no, you can't do that. And they got really upset with me saying,
not illegal.
Yeah, right. But they got upset with me because they didn't understand that what they were asking was actually illegal. So you had to be that political, that you had to massage the social side. You had to be that political person to say, okay, hold on, wait. I need to say no, but before I do, let me explain to you why I'm saying no. But I tell CISOs all the time, you have to be at times that person that says no, because people don't know. We know the attackers are coming in. We have proof of that.
Yeah.
We know we need to implement these security controls. I mean, that's just a reality. That's how you protect these systems and how you ultimately protect people. So if the right solution is the CISO says no, then you have to say no. If the right solution is the CISO goes in and says, hey, let me work with you. Let's figure out a good solution. There are absolutely times where multi-factor does not work. Let's say a service account or an account that you're going from one server to another. You can't put multi-factor on that because there's all kinds of issues there.
Right.
Absolutely. So let's put some other controls around it. Let's make the password really long. Let's only allow them to communicate. Don't give it admin rights on the service account. There's a lot of things you can do. So those are situations that are legitimate, and you work with them, you work with the users, you work with the culture. But there's other times where you have to say, no, hold on, guys. We have to do this. It's not we want or don't want. It's we have to. We have to protect our systems and our people.
Yeah, and I think that's another point to the CISO role that historically, not even having that role existing, is a lot of tech people are just would say that the answer is no. And if they say why, they're going to give a very long technical explanation on why it's not.
Yeah.
And then they feel like they're like C-level think you're like playing games with them because air quotes smarter, but that's not the case. So I think having that just like that'd be a great talk. Like, how do you finesse as a CISO? Because yes, you kind of know the rules, but everyone else doesn't. So how do you preach that advocacy to the group without bumping into the culture? Because it could stop you from a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
From something that could be illegal.
Absolutely.
And how do you explain that without, hurting everyone's feels?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see a talks of how do you say no without using the word no?
Yes.
That's one of those things. And I think every technical person, if they're in security, has to learn that skill set, because you have to be able to, perfect example, passwords. Everyone likes simple, easy to remember passwords. That's just a reality. But then we come in and we say, hey, we need passwords that are 15 characters or better or longer. And everyone's like, screw you.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. But I'll come in and I'll talk to them. It's like, okay, well, there is a reason why we need this, but here's the thing. How about I help you come up with a good process to create an easy to remember password that's easy to type, that is secure, and I bet you'll like it better than what your current password is.
Right. And I know where you're going with this, but I'm going to set you up here. So again, this goes back to we're different, culture's different. So I'm going to say that, hey, we don't do that. C-level thinks it makes it more complicated to log in. Our company's different. I know the other companies are. So we just don't, we understand what you're saying. We just don't think that's going to help us be more secure.
I understand how you feel on that, but let me show you. So why don't you come to me? Let me sit down. Let me show you some of the attacks. This is one of my favorite things to do, is I actually show them the attacks.
Yep.
And not only do I show them the attacks, it's like, hey, here's my attack laptop. Let me explain to you what you're doing. You don't have to remember the syntax. Don't remember the tools. Who cares about that? But let's do a brute force password attack. Here, type this in, do this. Let me show you the list of passwords that I can create just off the internet or go to something like Dhashed or whatever. Let's grab some passwords. In about 20 minutes, I can usually take anybody, whether it's a technical person, a C-level person, a board member, and I've done this to all of them. I can set them in front, give them some very basic attacks. And by the end, they're like, that was easy. Yes, absolutely it was.
Yes.
I did one of the B-Sides courses I did a couple years ago was Attacks Against the Organization. It was the exact same class that one of the people down the hallway was doing for the pen test course. We ran the same tools. We ran the same pieces. We did it. The only difference is
Kimmitt was there and it was better. Just kidding.
Well, yes.
I was kidding.
I'm going to say that.
I know who you're talking about too. I know who you are, sir. I see you, Mr. Redbeard man.
This is true. But the difference was I was running the commands and I had it up on the screen for people. The whole point of the class was to talk about the management decisions around it, not about the attacks, not about the syntax, not about the tools. It's like, let me show you how to do some OSINT, open source intelligence, and we profiled the company. The company we profiled just happened to be someone in the room volunteered.
Oops.
And it's like, okay, sure, let's do that. By the end of the first section of the OSINT part, we took a break. He comes up to me. He goes, you found our domain admin password. Like, excuse me? He goes, yeah, your password list that you created on my company, that's got the domain admin password in it. So he promptly left and he called up because this was the CEO of the company. He left, he called somebody and they had changed that. He was very grateful that I had done that because from a management decision, he now understands the reason why we changed passwords and have a multi-factor. Because randomly I put together some stuff from Reddit, from password crackers and all these different things. And I created this profile of this company and it freaked him out. It freaked out the whole room. Now, he didn't tell the whole room that particular piece.
Right.
But the whole room was freaked out that it was that easy. So we demonstrate this stuff. And from a management decision, you go, oh, shit.
Right.
What do I need to do? That piece right there, that's that light bulb that I'm looking for, because people then they stop thinking about how unique they are, and they start thinking about what are the attackers actually doing to me that I don't know about right now. So through the course or through this class, I show them how to find that, how to find these attackers doing these things to them and how to do it themselves. And it really changes their mind. It takes their mindset of, okay, I have problems. I can't get my people to do multi-factor.
Right.
To now, oh, I have to get them to do multi-factor. This is a different priority for me. If I don't get them to do it, the attackers win.
Right. And then having hands-on keyboards, like, I did it myself. I did that, and I'm not a technical guy. And it kind of goes to a discussion I always have when I talk, give speeches and stuff, is that security, and I feel like we're getting better, is kind of smoke and mirrors. Yeah. Like, it's like, well, we're secure. Like, we have security. Well, what do you mean you have security? Well, we have a firewall and we have security people. Okay. You tested it? No, it's on. See the guy sitting there that's kind of asleep. That's fine. He's not always asleep. And then you got the green light on the firewall. It's green, so it means everything's good. I tell people all the time, I was like, but you gotta test it. Yeah, that's how you break that mold. So demonstrating that, having people touch on keyboards and showing them how to use a brute force attack, they may not even know what that is. Yeah. Building a password and spraying at a interface is really eye opening. Yeah. So and that's a good change for them.
It's really no different than testing a lock. If you have a padlock.
Yeah.
I had was at an organization. We needed to lock up some computers for a litigation thing.
Yep.
And so had a company order us some locks. Now, this was a locksmith company, and I asked them, I need some locks. I need, I think about 100 of them, little tiny locks for locking computers. So I got this big old box and, very heavy. I pulled one out, and it's like, well, I'll just see how secure they are.
Right.
Now, I'm not a lock picker. I mean, I pick locks, but I'm not a professional at it. And so I'm in there, and I'm mucking with it, and I was able to pick it pretty easily.
Yeah.
But these are small locks, only has, a handful of pins and stuff.
Right.
But the locksmith was standing there, and I was just messing with it, and it didn't have it wasn't shielded. So I was able to get it to the locking pawl and move it, and it popped right open. And I'm like, okay, well, interesting.
Yeah.
I closed it. I did it again. Pop. Close it. Did it again. Pop. And I handed the lock back to the locksmith. I was like, I can't use these. These aren't secure. These locks don't lock.
Right.
You know, you don't need a key. You basically need a paper clip that's strong enough.
Probably just jab it in
there and move it. And if anybody wants to see that, I actually use those locks now for my demonstrations, for when I'm teaching people, because I sit there, I let them pick it, and they get frustrated, and I show them that little trick, thunk, and it pops right open. They're like, holy crap, that was easy. But it's, you know, kind of going back, how do you know a lock is going to protect the stuff you're doing? You have to test it. You have to check that lock to make sure that there is no vulnerabilities in it.
Yeah.
Make sure someone actually locks it. You know, I had a good friend who became a CISO of an organization. He walked in and they laid out all the softwares that they had in the organization. And they were spending probably $750,000 on security softwares. He was like, great, this is going to be, what are you doing with it? Oh, we haven't installed it yet. Oh,
okay.
Okay. Where are you going to install? Oh, well, we don't know. Like, oh, okay. And they had one, they put a SIM up, and he says, well, okay, you got the SIM up. What do you got going into it? Oh, nothing. You don't have any logs going into it? It's like, no, it's just, you know, it's running. But, so that's the problem. They get the tools, they throw in place, they're not looking at them, they're not responding, you know, so it's, it's a problem.
No, it happens a lot. I mean, I've worked for multi-billion-dollar corporations where they had a gigantic SIM, and I'm like, what is this? There's nothing. There's either nothing in here, or it has a whole bunch of shit that I don't even know. Like, we don't even need this. I don't really need from a big company. No offense to the UPS guys out there, the UPS devices. Like, I don't, for a backup, I'm like, if the power goes down, I'm like, I need like firewalls, I need switches. None of that was in there. Just a whole bunch of just UPS traffic. So, it was.
But they were monitoring it.
They were. And then another thing is, speaking of locks, this is actually kind of funny, an internal or a story that happened here. So, you know, we had the lockpick gunfight a while back. Yeah. So the best part was I don't know if Hickman just did me a wink solid. So the whole point of this is what we do is we have two, it's just kind of for fun. Also, we have the interns kind of compete for this. Sorry, kind of jumping out of the podcast here, more Alias culture real quick. So what happens is, in order for them to get a badge, they have to pick a lock from basically a toolbox, open it, they have a little Nerf gun, and it's like it's a showdown. Yeah, it's a shoot-off, right? And someone was like, come on, Donovan, it's been a while, because, you know, I'm like the old CEO who doesn't actually do anything cool anymore. And I was like, no, I could do this, because I can pick a lock pretty quick, maybe nothing too dramatic, but I'm still not too shabby. And I went down there, and they said, go, and I went and grabbed it, and I was like, oh, shit, this is open. So I just opened it up and just... And one of the guys was like, man, that was really fast. I was like, I know. It's who I am. But yeah, so that's how I won that gunfight.
But it's a good lesson, though.
It made me laugh so hard. I was looking at Hickman. I was like, I don't think he didn't lock it. I think that's the best part. Is I just flipped it open, and
but they never know. They never remember that any rule is there.
Exactly. So by the way, it was quote connecting, but it wasn't locked.
Yeah.
This goes back to the firewall. We have a firewall, but it has any in it. So that they any my lock. Anyone at any time can open it. Good stuff. So anything else that you'd like to kind of share on that? I feel like we covered a lot. So any other examples that, you know, hey, we're different. I like the multi-factor. Obviously the policy, this is illegal. You can't do that. Kind of changing culture. Is there any other piece or story that you want to kind of encapsulate on that?
You know, I think the other big one that has always hit home with me is people don't realize the impact of some of the attacks. And I had a CIO who, I may have told this story on the podcast before, but he came into my office one day and he was looking on one of my screens that was scrolling. And that screen was just it was a Raspberry Pi that was on the internet. It was monitoring authentication attempts. and it was just sitting there scrolling at all the attempts because it was an SSH and people were just trying to hit it all the time.
Yeah.
And he looked at it and he kind of got frustrated with it. He goes, "What is that thing?" And I looked over and it's like, "Oh, well, that's such and such attacking us." And he's like, "What?" I was like, "Well, okay, hold on. I don't know if it's actually the country, but let me stop it." I stopped it. I grabbed the IP address. I did a look up on it, and it actually was that country attacking us. And he really freaked out over it. And he leaves and he comes back in and he says, "What do you have to do to stop that? What do you have to do to stop that?" I was like, "Oh, well, really simple. I put a new rule in the firewall. It just blocks everything. It blocks that." Right. And he goes, "Just do it. This is going to have an effect on people because this is going to stop them from being able to do something without the VPN." He goes, "I don't care. Just do it."
All right. Send me an email.
Yeah.
With approving this transaction.
I absolutely got that from him. But I did it, and it actually had no impact on the organization. No one was actually using that functionality. But one of the things I talked to him later on was he saw it. He saw the attack coming in.
Yeah.
There was no way for him to go defend it to his board that he knew the attack was going in. He knew how you could stop it, and he didn't do it. So if he'd done that, if he had said, "Don't fix that," there was no way he could have defended that to the board.
Right.
And I give him a lot of credit for that because it takes to think about it from that point of view of I have to defend my actions to the board, to leadership, and actually now to a lot of regulatory agencies that if you make a decision not to do something and there's harm caused by that, you have to deal with those consequences, possibly criminally, possibly civilly.
Yeah.
So if you don't deploy multi-factor authentication and a system gets compromised, then the decision maker who decided that can now be liable for that. So that's something to think about. So he had me change it. We protected the organization, which was great. But one of the things that also helped me later was everything I asked for from that point forward. I went to him and say, "Hey, here's the logs. Here's the proof that they're doing this to us right now."
Yeah.
When I deployed multi-factor at an organization, the reason why I did it was because I had to call those people in the middle of the night as CISO. That was my responsibility. I called them in the middle of the night when their accounts got compromised. So I was watching them. Wow. Password fail. Success. Russia. China. Disable the account. I called them, woke up many people in the middle of the night. There's about 35 people I woke up over a 2-week period.
Okay.
I said, "Hey, this is Jonathan, such and such." And they all knew me. I said, "I have had to disable your account. It's been compromised. We'll get together in the morning and we'll get you set up." So I took that to leadership and I said, "Hey, I've had this many accounts compromised in the last 2 weeks. We need to deploy multi-factor." And they freaked out because I had real proof that things were getting compromised.
Yeah.
Now I don't sleep. Therefore, I was able to watch that overnight. I want people to sleep. So that's why you use some of these tools to help protect some of that. But I had the real proof. I went to them. I had a plan. This is how we need to do this. This is what we need to do. But the plan was not just the technical. The plan was going out and talking with the culture side, talking with the people, saying, "Hey, guys, this is going to create that barrier.
Yeah.
This is going to create that extra step you have to do. I understand that. We have to do it anyway because do you want me to call you in the middle of the night and wake you up? Because I'll do it." And it wasn't a threat. It was, I need to do it. That's my job.
Yeah.
So we deployed multi-factor authentication to 40,000 accounts in 30 days. Yeah, it was right in the middle of COVID or beginning of COVID. And we pushed through it and we did it and it was successful. Well, I probably had maybe 2 people of those 40,000 accounts that actually complained about it.
Yeah.
What was great was those people that I had to change their passwords in the middle of the night were so thankful that I had stopped it before they lost all their stuff, that their credit card accounts got compromised, all those things, because it was all tied to that email account.
Yeah.
That they start telling other people, it's like, hey guys, no, this is serious. We really do need to do this. Help Jonathan. He is trying to protect us. And I think that's one of the biggest things that when we talk to security people, talk to IT people, protect your organization, but communicate with them that that's what you're trying to do. We're trying to stop the attackers. Those attackers are coming in, going into those organizations, and they're taking them down, hard down. So when the organization says, no, we can't do that, it's generally a culture thing. So sometimes we have to go and we have to focus on the culture thing. Go and talk to them, go engage with them, demonstrate them, show them the logs, show them the effects. Let them talk to someone who's already been through this. If you've got a bank, maybe you say, let me see if I can get another bank to come talk to you that actually went through a ransomware.
Right.
And they can come in and say, yeah, this sucks. If you can prevent it, prevent it. That might change the culture side to them and the social side of their organization.
Yeah, and kind of I would say my last little piece on that would be, if you are having trouble getting stuff that needs to be changed, because we're going to be talking about patching till the end of times here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you definitely need a patching program. You need multi-factor. You need some type of EDR, antivirus, whatever it is on the machine, in your environment. And if you're getting pushback, you could just reach out to the community. Like I said, reach out for the oil and gas. There's other oil and gas people that have gone through that in order to communicate, so we can get out of this. We're breaking the glass on this. Again, security is just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Now there's practical, and also a few news articles. There was a few companies that the SEC is investigating a hack, but they're investigating the C-level employee.
Yes.
Not just the company. They're putting charges against them because they made or did not make a decision to protect once they were notified on something happening. So there's now liability behind it.
Yes.
There's again, being held individual is pretty new, and it's going to continue to happen. A lot of compliance coming up, and it's your fault because you didn't make the right decision.
Right.
And just something to be aware of. So kind of changing the culture and knowing that, you're really not that different, and hackers see you exactly if you're the dentist's office or you're a $55 billion company, you're all the same.
Yeah. When there's a vulnerability, it's just vulnerable. They don't care who it is on the other side. They just see that's vulnerable. I can take advantage of that. I might be able to get some money out of it.
Yep. So that's kind of it for us on the Secure AF podcast. Again, look forward to our new podcast, Breakout Secure After Dark. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Donovan Farrow. Nice to see you. And then Jonathan Kimmitt.
Yep. Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Y'all guys have a great day. Thanks.